O'Reilly.
You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome to NETtlen, the Sunbelt basketball spinoff of the Fun Belt podcast, part of the Believe Network. If you're a hardcore fan of the Fun Belt podcast, you already know all that, but we're getting into, I'm Shane Mettlin, one of the three stooges from the Fun Belt podcast, flying solo today, just to do a quick kind of recap of the MAC Sunbelt Challenge, which ended this weekend with the second leg that saw all the Sunbelt men's teams head on the road to play at MAC arenas and vice versa for the women after the men got off to a great start back in November, opening night of the thing, 8-4 against the MAC, flip it on the home courts, which I guess is about what you would expect. Given the relative evenness of these two leagues this year, but 4-8 for the Sun Belt at Mac Arenas to make it a tie on the men's side. I'm going to start though with the women's Mac Sun Belt Challenge, because that was the side where this year we got the game that was what this thing was designed for. We had two teams with top 60 nets playing each other, one from each conference, with an opportunity to really kind of build their resumes and one of them to potentially get a win that might help make it possible, not likely, but possible to begin to kind of talk about the at-large possibilities. And that was for James Madison and Ball State. Entering that game, James Madison, number 53 in the net, Ball State, number 59. Jamie pulls out a 78-74 victory at home against Ball State. They snap a 13-game winning streak for the Cardinals, and now JMU is sitting at a 13-game winning streak, 21-4 overall, 12-0 in the Sun Belt when they get back into conference play later this week. But interestingly enough, we talked about how this game might help the net for the Dukes and or the Cardinals with a win. Ball State moves up 2 spots to number 57 in the net with the loss on the road. JMU stays at number 53. So interesting how that works out. But it's not just what happens day to day. Ball State continues to win in the MAC, which they've really dominated that conference so far. Then that can only continue to help JMU. But that was just worth kind of starting there, because this had to be the kind of game that they imagined when they came up with this idea to do a MAC Sunbelt Challenge, play 2 games for each team. It had just have 2 games, ready to schedule for each team, which, ends up working out. But to get, this kind of, marquee mid-major matchup on the women's side, I surely love to see more of that on the men's side, where the money really comes into play. If you can win NCAA tournament games, that'll be a factor next year for the women too. But definitely, I think, you hear some complaining at this point in the season about having these games that, you kind of break away from your conference schedule. You have to scout an opponent that you don't know that well. The game for the vast majority of the teams really doesn't make a big difference for what you're trying to accomplish overall in the season, because, frankly, there's not a lot of teams that are that concerned about, an at-large bid, or if they do make it to the NCAA tournament, like what their seeding is. But should JMU run the table, continue to do well, and say lose in the conference championship game in the tournament in Pensacola, they're at least going to be at least some at-large discussion. I don't know if they get in, but there's at least going to be some at-large discussion, and this game certainly doesn't hurt that. It also really helps in the women's game in particular that you get this win, and that should JMU continue to play as well as they have, continue to win at the rate that they have, rack up a ton of wins here to end the regular season, that if they win the Sun Belt tournament, then you're talking about, a team that could be an 11 or 12 seed, maybe even higher. And in the women's game, that is such a big deal to be above a 13, because then you're not playing a true road game in the NCAA tournament to start with. You're playing on a neutral court. In fact, the home team that's hosting in each, pod, or however you want to call it, is probably rooting for you to, if you're a 12 seed, to knock off that 5 that they would have to play in the second round. So it's a huge deal. And I think, we saw that, the conference was able to get what they wanted out of this game. Particularly with JMU getting the win. It's a great day for a Sun Belt along those lines. Otherwise, in the women's side of things, Georgia Southern gets a win at home against Akron. Central Michigan knocks off Marshall, and Huntington. Kent State beats Troy. That's the one that's tough for the Sun Belt. That was when, Troy, their first loss at home. They don't lose at home very often, and they had cracked top 100 of net, heading into that game. So that may be the reason why JMU didn't move up with a solid win, is because Troy, one of their other, quality victories this season, probably took a dive a little bit with a home loss to Kent State. That one's disappointing. Toledo gets the best of a reeling Old Dominion team. They really have struggled as late, to sit at 8-6 in Sun Belt play, and another loss in non-conference, make them 14-11 overall. So that's another tough one for the league. Georgia State beats up on a really struggling Eastern Michigan team to get one for the Sun Belt. Northern Illinois knocks off App. South Alabama, though, this one is a conference game, and South Alabama gets their first conference victory of this. Jags there. Back to the challenge, though. Western Michigan tops Texas State. Southern Miss over Ohio. Miami, Ohio over Louisiana, and Bowling Green over Arkansas State. Another one that, frankly, pretty disappointing for the Sun Belt there, where Arkansas State had been really good at home. They're now 10-2 at home. They've been really good just overall, like right on the heels of JMU in second place, to lose to.
O'Reilly.
You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.
A Bowling Green team is 3-9 away from home, just 12-11 overall. That's a tough one for for the Sun Belt there. But Coastal Carolina gets the other kind of marquee victory for the Sun Belt. I think this will end up helping down the line as everything plays out, because Buffalo was looking really good in the MAC, 19-4 overall. Coastal gets a win at home against Buffalo, a good Buffalo team. So that one definitely boosts the MAC overall. But what we did see was JMU get that impressive victory that could benefit the Sun Belt Conference down the line on the women's side of things. Elsewhere on the men's side of things, though, as I alluded to before, losing record in the road games on there to kind of even up the series of the MAC Sun Belt Challenge, and some relatively disappointing results in this one too. I think, although nothing that I think is necessarily shocking along the lines outside of possibly, I think, the Kent State Arkansas State game. I feel like Arkansas State probably had to be favored in that one, but you also get into, I think, what people probably want to criticize this whole idea for is when you have a season like where the Sun Belt is right now, where the champion is not going to be, the regular season champion is not going to be in the at-large conversation if they lose the conference tournament. So it doesn't do as much for you this time around as it did, even last year. JMU, App State were really good. We're really probably not going to get into the NCAA tournament as an at-large, despite their really, really good records and everything else. But what it ended up doing is, I think JMU's victory against Akron last year at home really probably helped them get that 12 seed after winning the Sun Belt tournament. And they obviously get a winnable game in Brooklyn where they beat Wisconsin in the first round. And excuse me, a Sun Belt team moves on for the first time in about a decade, I think it was. And that was important for the league to get that. But it's a down year for the Sun Belt overall in terms of, where the conference is. And, so you don't get as much out of this leg of the conference challenge on the men's side this year. Really doesn't matter a lot. And for a team like Arkansas State, where, they're really, what's most important for them is to continue to stay in first place, or at least in the top two in the conference in the standings, so they get a double bye or the mega bye into the semifinals, and continue to do well in conference play. And really everybody, as tightly packed as the conference race is right now, 5-way tie for second, and then Old Dominion right a game behind that grouping. As tightly packed as it is, I didn't get the sense that anybody, even that lost yesterday, was that concerned about it, because this is just kind of like, well, it's the game in the middle of our conference race that, frankly, if we're going to lose one, this is the one to lose. And, I kind of got that vibe from a lot of coaches in their post-game interviews yesterday, running down those scores. As I mentioned, Arkansas State falls 76-75 at Kent State. A decent Kent State team, but despite 20 points from Joe Pinion, they couldn't stop Jared Solinger for Kent State, who had a big game, 27 points. That's one probably the disappointing result, because you do want to see Arkansas State continue to rack up some good non-conference wins just to kind of boost the entire conference. Troy ends up dropping 2 in a row on the road after falling at JMU earlier in the week in a key conference game. They lose 69-62 at Miami, Ohio. Georgia Southern gets a nice victory for them, as this continues for Brian Henry continues to be a big kind of turnaround year, really building off of starting to build something at Georgia Southern. It's not what anybody would consider a great year, but after not winning a non-conference game last year, to be 13-12 at this point, and they get a win on the road at Western Michigan. Good result for Georgia Southern. A lot of close games in this, 83-57 for Georgia Southern victory. They won comfortably, but there were a lot of close games in this series, and one of them, Ball State 77 over Southern Miss 76, a 1-point loss despite a great performance from Denaje Harris for Southern Miss, 23 points, 13 rebounds. He continues to have a great season for the Golden Eagles, but they can't pull out a victory on the road. South Alabama, another team that loses one to a good Akron team. Akron continues unbeaten at home. They're dominating the MAC in the standings. So not surprising necessarily that South Alabama loses this one. These matchups were set also when South Alabama was really at its peak, blowing teams out early in Sun Belt play and had risen fairly high into the top 100 of the net. They've come back down to earth a little bit, though they have gotten some wins to get remain tied for second in that 5-way tie in the Sun Belt. But 80-65 Akron victory, not necessarily surprising, but another one that, South Alabama, how much do they really get up for this game for what it means, other than because it doesn't mean much, when you are really in the heat of a conference race. That's the only factor. Eastern Michigan 76, Old Dominion 70. Louisiana, good victory for the Raging Cajuns at Northern Illinois. Another one of those close games, 66-64. Another close game, JMU cannot hold on to a 16-point first half lead. They lose 72-69 at Toledo. Mark Freeman had 23 points for JMU. Had scored to put them ahead fairly late, but they couldn't close that one out at Toledo. Another team that sits in that 5-way tie. Georgia State, they get a pretty solid road victory, 80-75 over Buffalo. Bowling Green takes care of Coastal Carolina fairly easily. App State gets one for the Sun Belt at Ohio. Ohio goes 0-2 in the challenge. The preseason favorites in the MAC, so just 12-11 right now after losing to App State 72-59. Miles Tate really, really good in that one for the Mountaineers. And 85-70 Central Michigan over Texas State. That one was close. Fairly late into the second half. Central Michigan really pulls away late in that one. To round out, that was the nightcap of the challenge. Rounds it out to, not a great day for the Sun Belt overall. But, like I said, on the men's side, it really didn't end up mattering that much. But let's talk a little bit about just what the league office has tried to do to boost things basketball-wise, and how we did see them get what they wanted on the women's side from the And I think what you end up seeing from having that kind of game in the women's thing is that, some years this is going to be a really good, really big, really important thing for both of these conferences to do. And some years it's not going to matter that much, but it doesn't hurt anything necessarily to play these games even in February. Certainly they're great in November to start the season with some really solid mid-major matchups. Everybody loves to have those games because it's not easy to schedule. So you're getting something out of that, even if you're not getting the major boosts in the net this year. You really hope to get what these teams did get was 2 games on their schedules, which is increasingly difficult for any decent mid-major program to do. Is, if you're a team that's going to be possibly good enough to beat somebody, but not necessarily good enough to be a quality loss, which is what a lot of Sun Belt teams really fall into that category right now. it's just really hard to get games on the schedule. So we see a lot of non-Division I games. We see a lot of games against, certainly not very desirable opponents, or you play a lot of bye games on the road because that's what you can get, or you need that to pad the coffers of your athletic department. And to have these 2 games that you just don't have to worry about scheduling, I think that's the one thing that you're going to be able to sell coaches on down the line, even if they don't necessarily like having to prepare for this game in February when it doesn't mean a whole lot for them. You do at least get that aspect of it that, hey, you can at least sell them on. It's going to make your scheduling easier. That's 2 games down that you do not have to worry about at all. And the coaches are going to like that as you continue to do that. But I think, what we've seen here recently too is that the 2 big things that the Sun Belt has done to try to boost basketball, this MAC Sun Belt Challenge was one of them. The other one was adjusting the bracket for the conference. And we hit on it earlier with Arkansas State. Is like, Arkansas State, are you playing to win a game against the MAC in February? Are you playing to hold on to one of those top 2 seeds in the tournament where you go straight to the semifinals? Getting a top 2 seed is a huge advantage. Being one of the top 4 is, a great advantage too. You get to go to the quarterfinals. We may even see that be an advantage of its own to get a game under your belt early in the tournament before playing a really good team in the semifinals. So, being one of the top 4 seeds is going to be huge. And we sit in a situation right now where Arkansas State is 1 game ahead of a group in first, only 1 game separating them, and 5 teams tied for second. ODU behind them, just 1 game behind that group. So you've got, really 7 teams that are firmly in the mix for not just top 2 seeds to get into the semifinals, but also those top 4 positions that, somebody could end up tied for second and having to play 2 extra games in the Sun Belt tournament, which we'll likely see some complaining about that. We'll see some, people upset that it'll come down to tiebreakers to decide something so big. But if you're Keith Gill and his staff at the Sun Belt office, you're not only creating something with this tournament bracket where you're more likely to send your best team to the NCAA tournament with a chance to win a game in the NCAA tournament, which is what everybody wants to do if you're in this league, and to not have to play games against, really lowly rated teams in the net that really hurts, your metrics of the top teams going into the tournament. You get that advantage. What byproduct you get out of it now is that 3 weeks to go in the regular season, almost every single game on the conference slate is going to be extremely meaningful going down the line. And, every game has a massive impact on standings and who ends up getting those top seeds. Wednesday night, we'll preview this the rest of the week as we jump back into conference play on the men's side. Wednesday night, Southern Miss at Arkansas State. Huge game against, Arkansas State is, the best team in the conference right now. I think they've shown that. But Southern Miss is a team that, if they are clicking, can beat just about anybody. They have so much talent. So that's a huge game. Troy goes to Louisiana. Another game. Troy can't afford a letdown against a Louisiana team that struggled at times this season. So big time game there. That, all these games are really going to matter going forward. Thursday night, ODU at Georgia State. One game that, although ODU is kind of in the mix, that's, maybe like the least intriguing game just because of, where teams are. And I actually take that back because Texas State UL-Monroe, probably maybe the more least intriguing game for the Thursday slate. But you've also got JMU, Georgia Southern. JMU on the road has struggled on the road. They're one of those teams that's tied for second. They really can't afford a letdown. Statesboro, App State at Coastal Carolina, exact same situation, although App State's been pretty good on the road. They can't afford a game against, normally you wouldn't pay that much attention to App State playing a 1-11 Coastal Carolina team, but you got to watch now because, that game's huge, has huge implications for a lot of teams. Marshall at South Alabama, game of the week, I would say, two teams that are tied for second. They're in that group. One of those teams is going to get the better of the other and shake things up a little bit, at least for 1 week. So I'm looking forward to very exciting 3 weeks of Sun Belt basketball. But here coming up in a few days, we're going to see some very important games. I'll definitely try to keep an eye on that, Marshall South Alabama one, especially 8 p.m. Eastern start. So I'll be able to maybe catch the end of that after covering the JMU game. But, overall, to wrap this up, I think I would say that, the major initiatives that they've put in place for Sun Belt basketball are showing to be, a success. Like for, the little things you can do to try to help a conference get somewhere. I think those things will end up helping, especially if you just have a season where teams play better in the non-conference early on and put yourself in a better position early in the season. Just didn't do that if you're a Sun Belt this year. It's a down year, but I think you kind of got to judge things on a sort of like a 5-year trajectory, and you had 2 years where you're moving in the right direction, so maybe 3 or 4 steps forward, 1 step back this year. If you can go forward again next year, conference can continue to be in a pretty good place basketball-wise to try to build on the success that they've had in football, baseball, softball, soccer, lots of other sports where the Sun Belt has been one of the premier mid-major leagues around. So that'll wrap it up for me today. Just getting in a little bit of a NETtlen bonus episode to talk MAC Sun Belt Challenge. We'll be back with a regular episode of the Fun Belt podcast here in a couple days. And I'll have more and more hoops talk with getting some guests on here as we wind down the regular season. Hard to believe we're approaching mid-February, and we'll be ready to start trying to make some plans for Pensacola very soon. So that'll do it for me. I'm Shane Metlen. You've been listening to NETtlen, the basketball spinoff for the Fun Belt podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.